The scream was very loud and went on for a very long time. Princess Anya, who was reading in the castle library, ignored it at first, but eventually lifted her head from her book to listen. "That sounds bad," said Gottfried, the librarian, in his quavering, high-pitched voice. Disturbed by the sound, he immediately turned into an owl and began to vomit up a nicely packaged parcel of bones from the mouse he'd had for breakfast. It was something he did when under stress. Turning into an owl, that is. The vomiting just came with the shape. "It does." Anya frowned. It was her older sister Morven screaming, which was not unusual, but the intensity and duration of this particular scream were quite out of the ordinary. Anya shut her book with an emphatic thump and latched it closed, since it was a copy of The Adventures of a Sorceress Typesetter's Apprentice, and the words inside would otherwise climb off the page and go wandering around the library. In fact, there were still several words missing from an earlier reading, including the particularly troublesome pair of instantly and forthwith, which Gottfried now believed had escaped the castle altogether, or had been eaten by one of the dogs. The screaming continued as Anya hurried out of the library, across the inner courtyard to the main part of the castle, and up the private stair to her sister's rooms. Morven was the heir to the kingdom, at least theoretically, so she had more space than Anya's little room. The sisters had not one, but two step-parents, so the matter of lineage was a complicated one. This was one of the most frequent questions Anya was asked later in life. How is it possible to have two step-parents and no actual parents? The answer ended up being rather straightforward. Their mother, who had been the ruling queen of the little kingdom of Trelonia, had died when Morven was 6 and Anya was 3. Their father remarried a year later, to Countess Iselda. So they had a stepmother, who was expected to be quite evil, but mainly turned out to be a very enthusiastic botanist. She was not interested in the children at all, for good or ill, only in plants. But then their father died a year after his marriage to Countess Iselda, and their stepmother married Duke Rickard. So the girls had two step-parents. Their stepmother, the botanist, wasn't a huge problem, but as it turned out, their stepstepfather was evil and wanted to be the king. Though Morven should by rights be crowned when she turned 16, in 3 months' time, it was fairly certain Duke Rickard would somehow prevent this from happening. Perhaps he already has, thought Anya as she knocked on Morven's door. Not waiting for an answer, she went straight in. As expected, her sister was lying on a lounge in her receiving room, screaming at the ceiling and kicking her legs. Her maid, Bethany, was sitting on a stool nearby, knitting. Large strands of the wool she'd stuffed in her ears hung down her neck. Anya leaned over her sister and waited until 2 things happened at the same time. Her presence was registered through the veil of tears, and Morven needed to take a breath. "What's happened?" asked Anya. Morven stopped screaming and started sobbing. Stepfather, guessed Anya. It was far more likely to be stepfather than stepmother. Anya hadn't even seen Iselda for the past month. She'd gone somewhere far off to collect a rare shrub or a sapling. Anya raised an eyebrow. She could normally translate Morven's sobbing speech, but this was beyond her. "Turned," said Morven at last. "Turned?" "Den home." Morven started crying even harder, so hard that tears were flying horizontally out of her eyes. Anya stood back a bit, impressed that this was even possible. Into Ricard has turned Denholm into something, translated Anya. One of the greater disadvantages of having Duke Ricard as an evil stepfather was that he was an accomplished sorcerer. Prince Denholm was the latest, total, amazing love beyond any possibility of measuring of Morven's life. The son of one of the kings from the petty kingdoms near the coast, Denholm was a thoroughly nice young man, one of the better princes in the continuous cavalcade that came to the castle to woo Morven. Anya liked Denholm, and thought he was unlucky to have soft, wavy blonde hair and blue eyes of the sort that made Morven fall in love with people. As Morven was remarkably beautiful herself, with her raven hair and snow-white skin and warm chocolate eyes, young men she fell in love with usually fell in love back. At least until she decided she liked someone else better. The spurned princes usually retired to their homes to write bad poetry and brood by the fire. Or they went on a quest, and in the process discovered that they also liked someone else better. Or they got eaten by a dragon. Whether at home, writing poetry, embraced by a new love, or in a dragon's stomach, they didn't come back. Getting turned into something was unusual. Denholm must have been foolish enough to try to talk to Ricard over breakfast. Or maybe even ask for Morven's hand in marriage, which to the Duke would have been the equivalent of volunteering for immediate transformation. If Morven was married, she would have allies, and it would be even more difficult to get rid of her. And with her around, Ricard could never become the king.